Okay, great. So this is, we're going to talk about now the last month of the Jewish year, which is the month of Elul, by popular demand. And it's going to relate to some other things that we mentioned. Somebody mentioned they want to learn a little bit more about prayer. Somebody mentioned they want to learn a little bit more about repentance, about tshuva. So it's all going to relate here. It's all going to connect back to this theme because of those two things are very important to understand the month of Elul. Critical. So to understand the month of Elul, especially in the Chabad context, although this has become kind of like a universal Jewish thing now, there's one original treatise from quite a while ago. This is a treatise from probably the late 1700s, from the Alter Rebbe, the first leader of Chabad, the founder of Chabad as a movement. In fact, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi. I'm sure Rabbi Bernath has mentioned him at least once, if not every class. So he wrote, this is from a book full of some of his most important works, all about the Parsha. And this is one which has kind of become a cultural Jewish phenomenon amongst at least people, more religious Jews. If you talk about this, it's the main. It's called the main analogy. The analogy that he uses. Everybody knows it now. There's songs about it, they sing about it, but nobody knows what it means. So we're going to know what it means. The analogy is called the analogy of the king in the field. Has anybody ever heard of that before? Not familiar? I see Celeste nodding.
No.
It's familiar to some. Okay. So there we go. So the king is in the field. So what does it mean? What is this talking about? And where does it come from? So we're going to learn a little bit the treatise, and then we'll discuss it, and we'll talk about exactly what it means. So we start with a few words from a verse. Ani ledodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine, which is from the Song of Songs, written by King Solomon. It's also an analogy, right? The whole Song of Songs is talking about the relationship between God and the Jewish people, using an analogy of a husband and wife. So the Jewish people actually are the wife, and God is the husband. It's an idea of the analogy is one of giver and receiver. I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. So what's special about these words? This is one of several kind of acronyms or anagrams for Elul, using the first letters. Elul is spelled Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed in Hebrew. And if you know the Hebrew, you have the Aleph here at the beginning, then you have a Lamed, then you have a Vav, then you have another Lamed. So I think the correct word is it's an acrostic. That's the one. It's an acrostic for Elul. Ani ledodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. This spells out Elul using the first letters. So the Alter Rebbe says this is actually an English translation of the text. The implication here is that we start with I am my beloved's. That's the first step. And then the second step is my beloved is mine. So there's two phases here. There's two things happening. First, he takes the verse and he says they're not simultaneous. The verse is in that order because it's talking very specifically about something. It's not just random. First, I am my beloved's, and then my beloved is mine, is to me. There's actually, interestingly enough, there's actually another place where you have the same thing but backwards. Dodi li v'ani lo. My beloved's is mine and I am his. So that's not here. So it's talking about something else. So we see the order is important. So he states this first phase that I am my beloved's, which he translates. He says what that means. He takes the verse, the language of King Solomon, and he translates it into a technical Kabbalistic term. He says this refers to an arousal from below, an isarusa dilatata, which is Aramaic. And that's an old, it translates to an arousal from below. I am my beloveds. I, referring to the Jewish people, belong to God. So what he's saying there, I'm sorry if my screen seems to be flashing. I don't know why we have the light going up and down like that. It shouldn't be. That's weird. Anyway, so he said, I am my beloveds means it starts from me and I am connecting to God. So what that means in practical terms is that I make the choice. I have the arousal. I am the one who decides to connect to God in the relationship. It starts from me. This relationship starts from me. So that's a phase. That's where basically the idea of that is that I have to be the one pursuing. I have to be the one who is pushing the relationship. And you see this in real life, right? In relationships. Well, I don't know if Rabbi Nath has mentioned Dr. Romanelli, a psychologist we work with on relationships. So he talks about the pursuer-distancer and distancer dynamic. So who's the pursuer in the relationship, and who's being, so you got to be so the idea here is first we are the pursuer. So this phase continues in the second paragraph now until Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. So basically he says that the entire month of Elul, this whole 30 days, is a phase of I am to my beloved. And that continues until Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when godliness is drawn down in an apparent manner. So that means that now the arousal comes from God during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That's my beloved is to me. That's from above to below. So there's a twofold response here. His left hand is under my head and his right hand embraces me. So there's two things that happen that when God responds to us during this second period. He says, first, from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's the left hand, which is the idea of fear. We experience awe of God during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. If you've been to the services and you've experienced Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that's what the experience is all about. Because it results from the revelation of God's sovereignty, his kingship at that time. That's like the whole theme of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? Is God's sovereignty over the world, is his kingship over the world, and so that creates some awe. Okay, so he's going to elaborate on this a little bit. This is just a little side note for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That's why in those prayers we talk about God as the king very often. His kingship over all the worlds is revealed in those prayers and during that time. Not just our world, but also the spiritual realms during that. So those holidays have fear of God and awe. And this spiritual energy comes to all of the Jewish souls and helps us to accept God as king throughout the year, to accept what's called the yoke of the kingdom of heaven throughout the year. The fear and love of God, so the idea here being that if we're going to have a relationship with God throughout the year, which is made of both love and fear, those are the two elements of it, the two kind of the yin and the yang of the relationship, the fear and the love. Fear really means respect. Okay, so this is about love and respect, which, as you all know, is the foundation of any relationship. So the way we get that fear and respect in a relationship with something that we can't see and can't directly experience with our senses, it has to be, we need help for that. It has to be given to us to some extent. So it's not generated, it says here, for the fear and love of God are not generated and implanted in a person's heart through his own efforts alone, but they have their source in the radiance of godliness drawn down from above at specific times of revelation. So in order to access that relationship, it's not just something we do on our own. God has to kind of give it to us, because it can't just happen naturally, because it's not like it's not like a normal thing to happen, just to be able to have a relationship with God who you can't see and who is beyond understanding. So in order to have that relationship, God needs to give us some of it to our soul directly, and we have to access it during special times. Rosh Hashanah is the special time when we can access respect and fear of God on those days, and we can unlock it for ourselves for the rest of the year. Okay, so that was all kind of like a little bit of an aside. Then he goes back to the main point. Vidodi li, my beloved is mine. The second stage is referring to that. That's what it is. My beloved is mine is God revealing all that energy, that spirituality, that we can have respect and fear him. That's what it means, Vidodi li, the beloved is mine. It's a revelation from above. Nevertheless, one must first awaken love and fear through an arousal from below. This is the task of Elul. What he's saying, in order to have this experience of Rosh Hashanah, in order to have this spiritual experience of Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't just happen on its own. Yes, it has to come from God, but it's only granted if during the 30 days before, if we pursue the relationship during those 30 days before. So now there's a bit of a contradiction here. There's a bit of a problem in what I've been saying when it comes to Elul, and what the Alter Rebbe has been saying when it comes to Elul. There's something that doesn't make sense, that doesn't add up in terms of what I said. What doesn't make sense? If you just think about it, what we were talking about, there's something that doesn't click, doesn't logically add up. If you're trying to understand Elul, take a minute, see if you have any questions about it.
Well, I definitely have questions, but I don't know if it's on the mark what you're asking it. I mean, in order to even embark on this path of stirring the faith within yourself, we're being asked to have a relationship with something that's 100% concealed from us. So for me, that's I'm already stuck on step A.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And somebody in the chat also made a similar kind of idea. Shouldn't we connect all the time? So first of all, both of those are kind of similar themes. Shouldn't we? Yeah, shouldn't this be possible all the time? On the one hand, on the other hand, how is it possible at all? Right? Because what we're saying is that Elul is the time for us to connect to God. It's not a holiday. Nobody's ever heard of Elul, right? Everybody, including people who aren't Jewish, know what Rosh Hashanah is, and we all know what that experience is like. But Elul, who's heard of Elul? And there's nothing going on. There's no holiday. There's no he said, the Alter Rebbe, this is you're both on the right, talking about this. The Alter Rebbe said it's a time of I have to pursue God. How am I supposed to do that? Right? We were just saying that the only way to have a relationship with God is he has to give it to you, because how can you, right? It has to come from him. It has to come from him some way. We can't just do that on our own. Yet we're saying that we need to pursue him. How does that work? We don't know how to pursue him. It's like a man needs to pursue a woman. He doesn't understand the woman. Okay, I'm joking. He doesn't get it. She needs to tell him. Although there actually is some truth to this, and it does kind of connect to what we're saying. She needs to tell him how to pursue him in subtle ways, right? He doesn't get it. He's stupid. Men are stupid.
My husband just said, he piped up. He's next to me on the couch. He said, "That's true."
Yeah, right. You guys know what I'm talking about. So it's the same issue here. God is infinitely more complex than women, or we can debate that. Celeste's husband, we can debate that. But yeah, God is infinitely more complex. So like, how are we supposed to do that? And if we are supposed to do it, then it should be all the time. Like, I think that's that's Alessandra. Like Alessandra said in the chat. Then we should be able to do it all the time. Right? What's special about Elul? It's not clear. And it doesn't, something's not adding up here. We're supposed to pursue God, and we just finished saying that we can't really do that. That's what Rosh Hashanah is for. So what are we doing during Elul exactly? Does everyone understand, or should I explain it in a different way? Is this a question? Did everyone get the question?
Makes sense, yes.
So far, so good. Anyone want to discuss that more before we continue? We're good? Okay, so let's go back to the shared screen. So the Alter Rebbe, who's writing this is going to answer this question. He doesn't ask the question, but he answers it. So very often in original Hasidic texts, in order to understand like why one thing follows another, you have to realize there's an implicit question, and like that's what he's explaining, right? So there's a whole implicit question here. He doesn't even really mention the question. He will ask a question, and it's kind of the same idea, but it's gonna, it's a little bit more subtle. So here he starts to deal with this. They put it in square brackets, which wasn't in the original text. It's along the lines of what we were saying about the divine service of Elul being initiated by man, but there's also revelation of godliness at that time that enables it, which is exactly what we were talking about. That's in square brackets. But all the Alter Rebbe says in the original text that you'd have to decipher is, it is known that Elul is a time when the 13 attributes of mercy are revealed. So we know this from Kabbalistic sources, that there actually is a revelation during Elul. God does reveal something of himself during the month of Elul. Okay, so that answers some questions. Now we understand Alessandra's question. You can't do this all the time. Elul is special. There's something special about Elul, but it strengthens the other question of how is this I'm pursuing? God is pursuing me here, right? The 13 attributes of mercy, that's okay, so it's some sort of divine, it's not the fear of God, the respect, it's not the Rosh Hashanah revelation, but there's some sort of divine energy during Elul, which is drawing me to pursue him. So how is that I am to my beloved? How is that my pursuit? It's the same thing here. It's just like Rosh Hashanah. There's no difference. So the Alter Rebbe is going to ask this question, but in an interesting way, in a little bit of a different way. He says, if so, it is necessary to understand why are the days of Elul weekdays and not festivals, right? We just finished saying that when there's a special divine energy, it's usually a Yom Tov or a Shabbat, a festival. He explains that the Shabbos, the Sabbaths and festivals are distinguished because they are days when a dimension of godliness, which transcends the natural order, is revealed. The godliness radiates downwards. In particular, this revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy is a very high level of godliness. This is the level revealed on Yom Kippur, in fact. Okay, so this is some Yom Kippur energy. And there's obviously a great difference between Elul, which is basically weekdays, and Yom Kippur. So before we get to the answer, right? So we see it's really asking the same question. Like, really, this whole thing is like one big holiday. It's really Dodi Li. It's my beloved is to me. It's a revelation from above. It's not what I was saying. So what is going on? Okay, it's a very strong question. Like, we're trying to, what is this Elul? It appears to be an utter paradox. I see somebody ask a question in the chat. Is it a preparation to more focusing on the approach of the very important time of Yom Kippur? Yeah, it's a preparation, but we're still trying to answer this question. Yeah, it is a preparation. We're gonna, yeah, we still have this issue that we have to pursue, and God is still pursuing us. What's the difference between these revelations on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, which are considered God pursuing us, and the revelation of Elul, which somehow is us pursuing God? How does that make sense? So he answers the question with an analogy, and this is where we get the famous analogy. It's the analogy was invented to help us understand and to answer this question, to put it in words that we can understand. Now the problem is we don't have a king anymore, right? But there's, we just had the first, there was an election debate last night, I hear, south of the border. And so we can understand a little bit using our idea of what we have now. Instead of kings, we have the president. The president is like the king. So we can understand that a little bit using in our own time. So we're not going to say the king is in this field. We're gonna talk about the president's campaigning. We'll talk about that in a minute. So this concept, the answer to this question, can be illustrated with an analogy. Before a king enters a city, the king is in the field. Its inhabitants go out to greet him and receive him in the field. At that time, anyone who so desires may go out and greet him. He receives them all pleasantly and shows a smiling countenance to all. As he proceeds to his city, they follow him. Afterwards, when he reaches his royal palace, One may enter his throne room only with permission, and this is granted only to the nation's elite, to a select few. So this was a thing. The king would be in the field, right? In medieval Europe. This was an analogy that people would be able to understand, right? From hundreds of years ago. And we still have this. We can still understand this. Okay. The president, whoever the president happens to be at that time, the president has today it's not a throne room, today it's the West Wing, right? And very few people are able to go into the West Wing, right? Very, very few people. How many people? Only very special, high level people in politics, or certain very specific people, people who've achieved incredible things, who get a meeting with the president in the West Wing. To have such a thing is considered like a once in a lifetime kind of privilege for most of us to meet the president in the West Wing. A day you'll never forget. That's one way you could meet the president. There's another way you could meet the president, but it's different, right? There's another way you can meet the president when the president is campaigning, when the president has to win an election, right? And they have to campaign. What do? The king, the president, goes into the field, and he smiles and he shakes hands, and there's photo ops. It's literally what the Alter Rebbe is describing, right? It sounds like, the photo op and hugging a kid and holding a baby and smiling and shaking hands, and that's what the president does when he's campaigning, or she is campaigning, right? So that's very different, though. It's a very different kind of experience, and you could meet the president much more easily. All you have to do, if you want to meet the president when the president's campaigning, you just find out where they're going. They're going to come to your states at some point, and you just show up, and you could shake their hand. Simple. What's the difference between meeting the president at a campaign stop and meeting the president in the West Wing? What's the difference between those two experiences?
Well, in the first scenario, the playing field is more equal, meaning that the king is kind of coming to meet you where you are, and then the latter is more that the king takes the position that isn't maybe like the equal playing field.
That's right. So what's one of the differences? One of the differences is that the king is coming down to your world, to your level, when he's campaigning, right? They go to the rodeos, and they go to you have the president scooping ice cream at an ice cream store or serving at a restaurant. That's the whole point, is they go to ordinary places and do ordinary things with people, right? That's the whole point of it. And right, that's what they do. That's the strategies. They come down to the level of the ordinary person. They want to see him, right? And in the West, in the West Wing, you're being called up, right, to this very special and rarefied place. So that is one very important difference.
So, Rabbi, maybe this is my cynical brain.
Mm-hmm.
If I think about the president analogy, I feel like when they come down to us, they're being kind of fake. They're kind of saying what we want to hear, and then they go up behind closed doors and we don't know what's going on, whoever that person is. So yeah. I don't like to think that analogy with our creator, but that's kind of what when I think of that with a presidential analogy, that's how it seems. Yes, they're accessible, but are they real?
Yeah.
Really who they are?
Yeah. Well, so whether they're real or not, some of them might be real, some of them may not be. It's not really our concern here, because even if they're not real, they still have to do that. There's a reason why, because that's the right thing to do. There's something that has to be done. It's this idea of the king going into the city, right? The king in the field before he goes into the city. So there's actually something going on, which is very important, that they have to do, whether they're authentic or not. We don't know, right? We hope so. Actually, what they're trying to do when they do that is they're actually trying to prove their authenticity. Everybody who's trying, I just want to make sure nobody's trying to get in that I can see. Oh, somebody's been waiting.
I had isn't it also just a different perception?
What do you mean?
You're perceiving differently, but it's all perception, whether
That's
you're
right.
in a room.
That's right. Very important point. And at some level, very nice to see Maura, my old friend, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I didn't realize you've been coming to these classes. That's wonderful. We're old friends, Maura. So at some level, absolutely. This is a very important point. At some level, it's just a matter of perception. If it's the same person, right? What makes the West Wing special is that it belongs to the king, to the president, the throne room. What makes it special is that it's the king's. So the king is in both places. We just perceive him or her differently, depending on where they are. It's a very important point. Okay, excellent. So could be seen as condescending. Yeah. If they're a condescending type of person, but they're trying to prove that they're not. They're trying to prove that they're just like you and me and be on our level and be with us, and that's what they're trying to do. And yeah, we can take it cynically, but there's a reason why they're doing that. There's something spiritual behind it that we're kind of talking about here. So we've pointed out a lot of the so it's an incredible analogy because it brings out a lot of details about deep things about this Elul month, about this energy. So there is one last distinction between these two ways that you can meet the king in the West Wing or on the election circuit. There are two big differences. There's a difference in terms of the experience because of that perception. Possibly there's a difference in terms of the experience. All right, let's say right now the president is Democrat, right? Let's say you're a hardcore Republican. Now let's say before this whole fight, now things are a little bit crazy. Maybe let's go back 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, okay, before it became a death match between Democrats and Republicans in the United States and everywhere, the whole thing. Let's say you're from one party and the president is from a different party, okay? Now, the president, who's not from your party, but you, let's say, accomplish something great, you win an important championship in sports, you make an important discovery, you have an expertise that they need, you get invited to the West Wing. Now, the president is not from your party, okay? But you have this thing and you get an invitation to the West Wing to meet the president. I'm going to say 99.9% of the time you're taking up that invitation and it's a very memorable experience. Maybe unless you're, from the extreme camps that we have now, but for most of American history, that's like you're saying yes to that, no matter who it is, and it's a very special experience. Would everyone agree with that? But when the president is campaigning, and he's not from your party or she's not from your party, then you're not going to go to that to meet the president. So if the president's coming to, I don't know, Iowa, and they're a Democrat and you're a Republican, when they're campaigning, you would have taken an invitation to the West Wing, but you won't take an invitation you're not going to go meet them in the fields. Why is that? It's a deep question.
Free to, because it's a choice. It's all up to you if you want to go to the field or not. It's not like being summoned.
When you're summoned, it's a choice. It's not a subpoena. it's not a criminal court. You're being invited. You're both implicit. You're implicitly. Everyone is implicitly invited to the president's campaign trail. Okay, so you're technically invited to that too. Okay, the one's an invitation just to you, one's to everyone. But what is really the difference then?
The answer from Celeste is very good. I guess it's a choice. It's a free will.
They're both choices. You don't have to go when you get the invitation. You also have a choice.
Right.
Well, so if you're invited to the West Wing, the invitation is extended to you specifically for a connection with you specifically. Whereas going to campaign trail, as you said, it's for everybody.
Yeah, only you become one of those select people. Let's say you're part of a team of people. Let's say you're invited there along with 30 others who participated on your big sports team or on your team of science or whatever it is. Sometimes they have these big 20, 30, 40 people there at the same time. Okay, so it's a little less, but you're still going. I mean, you're not going to say no to that. So yeah, it was still directed to you. You got an invitation, but if it's so special to meet the president that you'll take that invitation, why not go meet the president in the field?
Well, RabbiJosh, that's the thing. For me, it's not special to meet a president. So, I mean,
Alessandra, but if you were invited to the West Wing, you would go.
Depends on why. Yes, absolutely. But
so that's what I want to focus in on. That's the point. Why are you going to the West Wing, but you don't really, because you just said it.
Because I have an interest in going.
Yeah, and it's not the president. You don't really care about the president. No. That's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. Where are the president's real fans? Are they in the West Wing or are they in the field?
They are in the field.
That's right. The president's real fans, the people who actually care about the president, are the people in the field. That's the point. That's exactly what he's saying. Why? Because why does somebody go to the West Wing? It's not for the president. It's not for the president that they go to the West Wing. It's for the experience. Yeah. It's the revelation of the power of the president that you experience there. It's not about the president himself or herself or whatever. It's this whole experience of the majesty of the position. That is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is this experience of the awe, of the majesty of God's kingship, the revelation of his kingship. That's the feeling that you experience when you go to a throne room. This is the seat of government. This is the power. It's not the president that you're there for. You're there for the experience of sovereignty, the experience of what it means to be king, of what it means to be a leader, of that power, and the fear that you have, the respect that you have in that place. You go to imagine, when you go to the West Wing, you're going to dress up and you're going to be perfect and you're going to follow all the rules and the manners and the respect and only speak when it's your turn to speak. And, but the people in the field, you're picking your nose, then shaking the president's hand. You're wearing your ordinary, street clothes. You're not like dressing up in a suit or wearing a cocktail dress, to go to the field, to go on election trail. You're coming as you are. And who are those people? What are they coming for? They're not coming for the experience of the sovereignty, of the power and the majesty and the awe of the experience. They're coming to meet their candidate or to meet the president. They care about that person. They want to shake their hand. Those are the real fans. Those people.
Excuse me, is the synagogue, the shul, the field, and the White House, the West Wing at the same time? So
the synagogue is everything, because this isn't the analogy here is not for a physical place. The analogy here is the kind of experience that you have at the synagogue. It's a spiritual experience. Mm-hmm. There's a certain experience you have during the month of Elul in your own life and in the synagogue. Okay, there's one experience. And then Rosh Hashanah and the 10 days of Tshuva and Yom Kippur is a different experience of your life and a different experience in the synagogue. What is the difference between those two experiences? So what we're saying here is that Elul is all about Ani Ladodi, I am to my beloved, right? So, but what's the difference? We asked, what's the difference between Elul and the rest of the year? And God has to give us something to have a relationship. How does it come from us? The answer, what we're saying, is the type of revelation that happens during Elul is not it's not being invited to the West Wing. It's not that type of relationship. It's a relationship where God is saying, I'm in the field. If you are my fan, come meet me. If you're into me, if you care about me, then I'm here for you, and you can come meet me, and you don't have to dress up like you do on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and you can come as you are, and it's not going to be a crazy experience like the West Wing. You're not going to see the majesty and the awe of the divine. What you're going to see is the relationship that you and I can have. That we can have a moment where we shake hands and we look eye to eye as we are. That's Elul. And the people who do that, those are the real fans. Another version of this analogy, it's something that Rabbi Bernath has published on his Facebook quite a few times. His write-up of this is a famous experiment with violinist Joshua Bell, one of the world's greatest violinists. So they did a social experiment where Joshua Bell went to a subway station in Washington, D.C., where people are very busy going to their, job, and he spent an hour busking, playing violin with a little place to collect money to see how much he would make and to see who would stop. And, Joshua Bell is obviously, he's, to see him in concerts is a fortune to see him in concert. We're talking like world's top violinists. So he goes to the subway, he goes to the Washington, D.C. subway, and he plays and he plays and he plays one piece after another. Now, if you're a real fan of Joshua Bell, this is an absolute dream. This is front seat tickets. You could stay there for an hour and you could up close, he's a foot in front of you and he's playing violin. I mean, if you're a real fan, this is the dream right now. I mean, he's right there, right? So he's playing the violin and nobody stops. The only people who stopped, to try to pull their, you see kids are pulling on their parents, I want something's going on here. For the whole hour, nobody stops. He gets a few bucks. He doesn't really make any money. At the end of the hour, just at the end, somebody recognizes him and a little bit of a crowd, but it's the original write-up is really interesting. It's from the Washington Post, I think. But it's an incredible analogy for the king in the fields. When people go to see Joshua Bell in concert, most of them are not there for him and his music. Most of them are there for the experience, the majesty, the whole experience. So you pay the money and, the experience you get being in a concert. The real fans are the people up in the nosebleeds, right? The real fans are the people who are not there for the experience. They're there for the thing itself. And there aren't very many of those people. And not until the end of the hour did they run into one of those people, into a real fan. So Elul is the time when we can decide if we want to be the real fans. And that's why you see that it's generally people who, this is just a general thing, people who have a little bit less relationship with Judaism are going to know about Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but they're not really going to know about Elul. Elul is something you know about only if you are interested to know about it. It's not something that you're going to find out about otherwise. It's something that you have to be interested in. So if you're interested, then God is there. And he's all there during the month of Elul. It's his essence, the same energy that exists on Yom Kippur, the 13 attributes of mercy, which are the essence in many ways of the divine. 13 attributes of mercy is that's the whole theme of Ne'ilah, of the final prayer of Yom Kippur, which is perhaps the highlight of the year in terms of prayer. That energy is available during Elul, but it's just there in a different way. It's there in a way that it doesn't inspire you. You have to be the one who makes the decision and says, I want to do something, I want to access it. So this answers both questions, right? We understand now how Elul is different than the rest of the year. We also understand how this is both a revelation from God, so we can have a relationship, it comes from him, but it also is different. It's ani ladodi. We have to pursue it. There's no invitation here. It's not Rosh Hashanah. We're not being invited to buy our shul membership for another year and getting a phone call, little shul joke there. You're not, no one's calling you, physically and spiritually. There's nothing drawing you to it. There's no experience of Elul, Rosh Hashanah, it's like, whoa, it's an overwhelming experience. The prayers and the singing and the whole, it's like a big deal. Elul is not a big deal. It's just a regular day. But the world's greatest violinist is playing in the subway on a regular day. Are you going to stop and pay attention? Or are you just going to continue like it's not happening? That's Elul. It has to come from you. You have to make that decision to say, I'm not going to work on time. I'm going to be a few minutes late because something really special is happening right now. I'm going to make some time for spirituality. When you make that decision during Elul, then so the way you do that, then you can access the highest levels of the divine, and you can be invited in during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to the throne room as well. The way you do that, the way you have that experience, is to add in a little bit of prayer and tefillah and tshuva in repentance. And the way we do that is to spend a little bit of extra time doing cheshbon hanefesh. It's the month of accounting, right? At the end of your year, if you're a finance person, if you're in a business, at the end of every calendar year, you have to spend time doing your calculations, doing your accounting, and send in a tax return, how much you made, how much you lost, right? So Elul is the same thing. It's our spiritual accounting. We have to send a tax return to the to the divine IRS. What did we gain? What did we lose this year? What were our costs? What were our expenses? And how can we do better next year? That's what the month of Elul is there to think about. And yeah, so like it says here, God's countenance, his very essence, is available during this time. So we turn to him with our essence, then we draw down this amazing energy of the 13 attributes of mercy. So that's the continuation here. I posted it there if you want to read it. But that is the main point. That is the main theme that we have for our time. So I'll leave a few minutes for comments or questions.
I have a question, if it's okay.
Mhm.
So I think a couple people in this group are doing the 60 days kind of outline. I know I think Jill's doing it. And so what I'm wondering is, as we're going through this process of refinement and seeing where, like, the places, our soft spots that we need to work on or where we can improve, can this be interpreted then by what you just taught us, that it is just as powerful to teshuva, to do this self-refinement for this 60 days as it is to show up and do it on Yom Kippur? Not that you would choose, but I'm just saying it's kind of equal in terms of what the goal.
What it's saying is that right now, if you want to have the experience of Yom Kippur, if you want to be in the throne room of Yom Kippur, then, like he says, the people who join the king in the field sometimes get dragged along to the throne room as well. It's one of the things he mentions in the analogy. So I didn't go into that too much, but the idea is that when you do the work you have to do now during the month of Elul, that's what facilitates the experience. It allows the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur experience to happen, and happen in a way that it's not just everyone's going to have the experience, but is it going to change you? Is it going to be profound? Is it going to hit you? Is it going to affect your animal soul? Is it going to change anything about you? The only way that happens is through the preparatory work. That's through Elul. Otherwise, you can go to Rosh Hashanah and Kippur and you can have this experience, and then it's gone, because that's how you go there, you experience, and it comes from above. It didn't come from you, so it's not part of you anymore. When you do the preparatory work, when you have Elul, you've prepared yourself. When you go into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it hits, and you actually take it in, and you might actually change. So, trigger warning: if change scares you, then don't do this. But if you're looking for change, then this is how to do it.
Thank you. Thanks. That helps.
Sure. Okay, any other questions about this? All right, if that's all, I think Rabbi Bernath told you guys I'm not doing Talmud. I just was able to cover Chassidut. Got to go handle the kids. Going to visit an army base today. It'll be fun. And glad you all joined.
Thank you so much for being
you.
here. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.